Speaking of surprises that are interestingly lit, The Cell.
Yes. So
You have notes?
yeah, I'm trying to get back to my former glory. How I
I dig
used
it.
I used to. Not to say that I haven't approached every episode with the fervor of before, but I mean, I just got out of the habit of actually like consuming the media and taking the notes and um yeah. So I don't have actually only for the first half of the movie. Like I didn't take notes for the second half, but there's a reason.
Because the second half is so messed up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, essentially. So yeah, the cell. Um, I don't want to get the guy's name wrong. The director. It's like Tarsum Singh, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Not the seller. That's stupid. So Tarsum Singh. He also did, as we talked about, the Immortals.
Which
And
I love.
right.
Let's go
Uh,
ahead and put our resumes on the table. I love Immortals.
and then you've got The Fall, which I really love Lee Pace for one really big reason, and it's Pushing Daisies. But he was also Ronan the Destroyer, so there's
I was
that.
gonna say he was Ronan. He was in Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit movies. Um,
Another interesting fact is that he directed the Losing My Religion video for REM.
Lee Pace.
Oh no, Tarsum Singh.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm like, what a weird career move.
Yeah, no, Tarsum Singh. He did a lot of commercials and things, and The Cell is actually his feature debut.
I mean,
Um,
Michael Bay did Got Milk commercials, so like,
well, it seems like a similar career trajectory because Michael Bay went from Got Milk to Explosions, and Tarsum Singh went to Nike shoes, or from Nike shoes to this.
watching this movie, I remembered why I didn't remember it was Jennifer Lopez in it because she's
Why?
terrible.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, nobody puts in a good performance in it. I
No,
mean,
no,
not
it,
even D'Onofrio.
no.
And that's not his fault. It's nobody's fault because I mean, Vince Vaughn is capable of doing well. It's not often because he's
Yeah,
mostly in comedies, and it's unless you're like a very uh like an explosive talent like Jim Carrey or Robin Williams, they
sure.
can put in great performances in comedies. Birdcage comes to mind. Uh,
The yeah, the so this is something that I am oddly familiar with. The idea of good actors giving bad performances. Hayden Christensen, this one's for you.
oh no.
When a director, when you have not rehearsed enough, and a director goes with an early take rather than the one where you get comfortable in the scene. When you're familiar with the scene, you're sitting in it, you're doing it over and over again, you get to start that, that natural feel where it's comfortable and you feel like in the character's skin. And nobody in this movie gets in their character's skin. They are uncomfortable start to finish. Every line is like, it looks like their first or second take.
And I
Um,
wonder if any of that has to do with just how bonkers creepy some of these scenes are. And they're just like, all right, I want to be done with it.
it's probably a combination. See, when a director is really new, they're not sure how much they can push actors. And so, I mean, you've got Jennifer Lopez and Vince Vaughn and Vincent D'Onofrio, who's already at this point done, Full Metal Jacket,
Exactly.
and you are working with people,
Hell,
and
Men in Black. to go back to what I was saying about a great performance in a comedy,
Yeah.
D'Onofrio in Men in Black he steals the entire movie.
Sure. Absolutely.
So anyway, so not to cut you off, it just.
But yeah, no, because when you're a new director, a lot of times you don't know if you can be like, hey, that was good, do it again.
Yeah.
That was good, do it again. And are you pissing off your actor if you've never worked with actors and know that they're used to doing, 40 takes of a thing? Then you might be tempted to go, okay, nothing went wrong on that take, so let's go with that one.
Yeah. I mean, there's a handful of directors for doing 2-3 takes and that's it. Ridley Scott, I think, is one of them. I think Tarantino's another one. But what's funny is that it's always pointed out as an attribute of the director.
Yeah.
They're like, when they're talking about them, it always comes up as like, oh, well, he only does, 2 or 3 takes and then we move on.
But they also rehearse a lot.
Sure. But it's just to go with like, you have to know your craft. You have to know exactly what you want your scenes to look like, how you want them to sound.
Right.
Which is what was so weird, is why the prequels were so bad in Star Wars. Is like, of all people, Lucas should have known.
He didn't focus on the acting though. Like, he was like, his mind was on other things. His mind was on the CGI, was making sure the green screen was correct, that it was tracking correctly. They delivered the lines accurately. Now we just need to animate the movie, and that's kind of where you get into where even great actors like, Ewan McGregor in the prequels is still like stilted and like lifeless. And then you watch him in literally anything else and you're like, God, he's so good. How did, like, even though in the prequels,
Liam Neeson in it. I forget
absolutely,
that Liam Neeson is in the first episode 1. I'm like, oh, that's right. What?
yeah. And if you watch him in that, you're sitting there like, how is he delivering these lines? Like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
But that's the, little rehearsal, go with the second or third take. The first time, nothing goes wrong.
Yeah.
And, it's like you delivered the lines technically, but you weren't really performing because you're not comfortable with it yet. And,
right.
So
Tarsem Singh, his directorial debut, this is kind of still when like J-Lo was on her kind of streak of making movies. I think she's kind of cooled off by now. Like the last thing she did was something about cheating on her resume and getting a corporate job. I don't remember. But Leah Remini was in it, so that tells you anything. So this is kind of like when she was like hot, and it opens in like a desert with like this, I don't want to say awful music. It's like cacophonous.
yeah.
Very Middle Eastern-y kind of vibes.
Yeah. It's not meant to be like melodic.
It's not pleasant. Yeah, it's not a pleasant sound. But it's because she's in the mind of a child that is comatose, and she's trying to coax him out of that.
Right.
And yes. So then she gets pulled out of this consciousness, and she's in this like red muscle suit. And one of my biggest peeves with the movie is that they don't explain why that suits or why they have to be suspended in the air. But what I thought was interesting, and I didn't pick up until I didn't think about it until right now, is Carl D'Onofrio is also suspended in the air while he is pleasuring himself. So you noticed it.
Yeah.
Sure. But I didn't think about it until just now, and they always do it one time.
I'm just so happy you made that connection.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. I'm getting better. I'm learning.
What
Um,
else do they have in common, Heath?
Now I'm on the spot. They are both human beings.
Oxygen dependent.
Oh, God, they are both mainly carbon. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. Like they're suspended in the air, when they're in the dream state, and the reason that Carl does it, he's got these hooks in his back, and so he suspends himself over his. We've anyway. Carl's a serial killer. There you go. We kind of jumped past that, and his victims he turns into dolls, is what they say, and he has these hooks on his back, and he gets suspended over them, and he masturbates while watching the footage of them drowning because he rigs up this a cell that slowly floods and they drown. He doesn't like to look at their naked body while he's before he repairs them. Um, and yeah, the only time we see him suspended is when he's furiously masturbating, which thankfully we don't see, but it could have gone either way with this movie. Um, but then that's it. Like that's the only time that we actually ever see it. So I don't know. I don't know what they have in common.
How about this? When they are suspended, the person they are, let's say their goal person
Mm-hmm.
is dead.
Okay.
When she is suspended, she is entering Edward, who is in a coma. He is not capable of movement.
Okay.
And when D'Onofrio is entering his victims, they are dead. They are not capable of movement.
Okay.
And ultimately, they are using the other person in the same way. Now, I don't know if this is Singh trying to imply that maybe they just have common ground, or if he's actually implying that maybe psychologically social workers like JLo are harvesting victims rather than trying to like actually help. I mean, it's so really interesting fact is that she's a social worker, psychologist, whatever she is, who is
Right.
trying to help a child, and at no point does she ever help a child. Instead, she learns throughout the course of the movie. I apologize, we are jumping way ahead. That the
Yeah.
only salvation to be found for these children in their minds is to drown them, just the way Vincent D'Onofrio has drowned.
Yeah, I think that's cumbersome. Because oh man, do we jump to that or do we
Let's go through a little bit of it. I think we will get there.
okay. Um, so as we've kind of briefly touched on, Jennifer Lopez and Dylan Baker and I forgive me, I forget the black chick's name. Baptiste is her last name. Really well known English actress. Um, they are scientists that have created this way to jump into the unconscious mind of a comatose person. They interviewed a bunch of child psychologists, and nobody was able to uh, utilize the technology properly, or whatever they said.
They all just observed and reported.
That's what it was.
None of
And
them interacted or intervened.
And Jennifer Lopez immediately was different and was able to. They said that she was actually. I think all they said was she's different. I don't think, to your point, they said that she helped anybody.
Right.
So then it works by they put on this muscle suit. They have this chip in their like the fleshy part of between their fingers that enables them to escape the dream if it gets too intense. And then they are suspended with this cloth over their face. It's got like a circuit board printed on it. And then they're drugged up, and through science magic, they enter the mind of their person. And they're about to cut the funding because she's not getting anywhere with this kid, and the kid's parents are the ones that are keeping the project alive. So they fight, and she gets 6 more months. So that's kind of our base setup. She goes home. She's in her panties to show off her ass. And then she smokes a joint in the weird, like, she just looks unnatural doing it. And I'm like, oh, spark and a J, got it. Okay. Guess that's what you have to do to get over what you see in other people's heads.
Hello, fellow teenagers.
Yeah. So intercut with this, we see D'Onofrio, Carl Starger. He picks up his latest victim, prepares her. We see him get up on the hooks, like I said before, rubs one out, and then drops her in a shallow ravine. That's when enters Dean Norris, Vince Vaughn, and Jake Weber, who I always get confused with Alan Cumming, or I used to at least when I was younger. I was like, oh, it's Alan Cumming. Oh, it's not.
I had to look him up because I was convinced I had seen him in something else. I haven't.
Oh, U571 is like the big one that he's in.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it, but that was like years ago. Not enough that would make me go, oh, that's where I know him from. And I kept thinking he was the guy who played Ozymandias in 300, but he's not.
Oh.
I know.
Oh, wait. Okay.
But in this movie, his name is Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Like, I understand this is the year 2000. You know, dub in the Conan. Year 2000. But Gordon Ramsay's a name at this point, right? Why do that?
I don't know. Maybe he was a smaller name, and the writer was like, "Yeah, I'll just throw in a nod to my favorite chef." I mean, he didn't have a TV show back then, I don't think.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it is weird looking back 20 years after this movie comes out and being like, of all the names, of literally all the names, why this? You could have named him John Smith and it would have been better.
I don't know. I think Gordon Ramsay is, I mean, it's a living name. That's a name that sounds like somebody would really be named, whereas John Smith was like, oh, the writer couldn't think of anything.
Yeah, okay.
Real unfortunate that, time would prove Gordon Ramsay to be a name more interesting for someone else.
Yeah. So they're all feds, and Vince Vaughn is convinced that Carl wants to be caught because he's gotten sloppy. They find an albino dog hair.
German Shepherd hair.
German Shepherd, yeah.
Real specific.
And so they're like, oh, we got to find out who has German Shepherd albino. And so anyway, through detective work, within a couple of minutes, it seems, they find it. My favorite guy in this movie is the shaky eyes guy. I can never remember his name.
From Identity.
Yes, from Identity. And he's in The Legend of 1900. Like, his thing is that his eyes shake rapidly. He has a condition. But
he looks almost exactly like an adult from my childhood. Like a guy I went to church with and would regularly see. Like they look very similar,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
only difference is that eye thing.
Well, every time I see him, I'm like, yes, because he's actually a really good actor. Like he's
Yes.
really good, and he just whether he just doesn't seek work or doesn't get it, I don't know, but he is really, really good. And he has a bit part in here as the MacGuffin pusher about this made up schizophrenia
Yeah.
that triggers seizures and locks the body down or whatever it is it does.
Right. Turns
The
you into a
kid,
vegetable.
yeah. So the kid at the beginning of the movie has this, and now we have found out that Carl has it. And he suffers a debilitating seizure right before the feds find him. So he's already prepped another person, like he's kidnapped her in a garage by setting up a
Drowning machine.
she guy's dog because he puts a block there. The dog has been trained to lay down and yelp. She gets out. She's like, oh my gosh. And I obviously don't know what it's like to be a woman because I'm not one, but she goes into this garage. It's a well lit garage and is immediately like on edge and takes a taser out. I don't
It's
know
pepper
where
spray.
oh, okay, pepper spray, whatever. I don't know where they live. I don't know what her past is. I don't want to see anything about her. But damn, like she is on edge. I mean, clearly she's vindicated for being on edge, but she had no reason to be, other than the fact that she's a woman in this parking garage and it's nighttime and whatever. So, she gets nabbed and put in a box or her cell, and thus sets up the movie. They have 8 hours or whatever it is before the thing fills up. I don't know how they know how much time he has, but that's just what they say.
Because they have the video of the last drowning.
That's right, because they find it in his
House.
his house where he has dug up the floor in the basement. Very Silence of the Lambsian. Um, so that's our setup. They put him in the muscle suit and hang him up, and J-Lo enters his psyche, and it is horrific. But the one thing that I really do think that this movie has merit is costuming and camera movement.
Yeah.
So the very first scene that we see while she's in Carl's mind is the camera is underwater, and it comes up like through not seaweed, but like water grass and stuff.
Yeah.
Comes up out of the water, and it's a baptism, and it goes over the baptism, and it's all one motion, and then comes back down upside down back under the water.
Just makes a kind of arc over the scene that's happening below, pointing at
And
it the
it's
whole time.
awe-inspiring. Like it's a beautifully well done shot, well crafted. Because then it goes under the water and then goes right into whatever the next scene is with no obvious transition. So
the water line is our transitions, really.
Well, sure. He's a deft director in as far as that's concerned. But I mean, I guess that might be more his cinematographer. But from there, it's just nightmare fuel. The first thing we see is a black dog that's contrasted to the white dog he has in his reality, and it's shaking blood off. And then we see like some MC Escherian stares, and then Jake Thomas, who is actually Matt McGuire and Lizzie McGuire, plays plays young Carl. And probably the most infamous scene in this entire movie occurs.
The horse.
The horse. So he's in there I think either brushing or petting the horse, and J-Lo, being her psychologist self, tries to approach, and he hasn't said anything, but you see the terror in his eyes, and you see a clock ticking. And right as it's about to hit the red and ding. He runs and pushes her out of the way, and he tumbles back, and this series of blades comes down. There's glass panes, and just not sections this horse, which somehow is still alive. And you can see inside the horse, like the muscles moving and the organs, and it's because then it moves out like this. So if you ever went to the bodies exhibit, that's what it's like, because they have that at the bodies exhibit. Which, oh my God, and it's a real thing. So that's almost about where my notes end. We fall into the typical horror movie tropes of jerky camera movies, which I hate. I'm just happy that nobody shook their head like violently. Well, it ends up happening later, but we see his past victims, and they're all dolls. So he turns them into and she somehow trips some mechanism that opens up the doors and windows and such, and out comes like an American Gladiator's topless weird thing, and slams her against the wall, and then takes her to King Starger or King Carl, and he has this cross on his face and this gigantic purple cape that surrounds the room. And he stands up, and it's a stark white room, and this like purple, this really strong purple. He comes down and he yells, "Where do you come from?" And she gets out of it. So yeah, that's where my notes stop, because the rest of it is just, it's nightmare, man. It's scary shit.
All right, I'll keep going.
Pick it up.
I'm going to bring in some more details that may make you go, "Oh crap, that apparently was important." I'm sorry about that. So Jennifer Lopez escapes the mind and goes out and is sitting next to a fountain talking to Vince Vaughn's character. And they're talking about why he does what he does. And he comes to say that he used to be a public defender or a prosecutor. And this guy got away with molestation charges on a technicality, and then murdered the girl and got away with murder by pleading insanity. So it's pretty clear that he doesn't buy into insanity as a plea, or as at least as a justification. Right. And he even goes so far as to say, like, I can say for certain that there are kids who went through far worse and came out okay.
Which it definitely implies that he's talking about
himself. Right. Yeah. So Jennifer Lopez decides to go back in. Only now she's just straight up caught, like in a cell, caught. And she's in a small cube, which she escapes by floating downwards. Like a bird. And she finds Vincent D'Onofrio's dog, Valentine, the white German Shepherd, who guides her towards young Carl. And young Carl is in his house, and this time she's trying to help him, protect him from his father.
Yeah.
But Carl shoves her into a closet, and you wind up seeing him get beat for breaking dishes, for playing with dolls, for a lot of stuff.
And that's a really rough scene. Like, I mean, I didn't have a traumatic childhood or anything, but like just watching it, like I think I said before, like the whole movie to me is just unsettling.
Yeah.
For different reasons throughout. And like the whole purple cape, where like that whole part there, I hate. It's I don't know what to say other than scary to me. And then the abuse that he suffers. I mean, I know that that happens, and it's baffling to me, and it just adds another just layer of like I don't want to watch this movie. But
Yeah. Another thing you may or may not have noticed about the scene with the purple cape is that he is sitting between two red kind of towers. When he's on his throne, there's just these two red kind of towers, which I honestly think represent the towers of where he kills his victims. Outside there are two silos.
yeah,
And regularly when he's killing someone, you will see two towers of some kind, pillars. Because in the next scene, while she's watching him being abused, she then goes on to see Vincent D'Onofrio killing his first victim. And he's like, she was the first. I was really sloppy. But as he kind of fades into the shadow, the other guy, now with like horns, looking like a goat, but really powerful, like takes over and is like assaulting her.
another just like
Hard to watch, yeah.
yeah,
So this time, Vince Vaughn decides to go in to get her out. And he... Okay. So he goes in and finds her with this like bird mask on her face.
yeah,
Sorry. The monster Vincent D'Onofrio puts a collar on her, which apparently he makes for all of his victims as a way of ownership, like a leash.
yeah, and like the indication that she has lost. Oh yeah, we skipped over that. Um, you can lose yourself in these dreamscapes. And if you do, then you can convince yourself that what's happening is real, which ultimately kills you.
Well, yeah, because then if you die, you've died for real. So which is why Vince Vaughn goes in and he finds her with this bird mask on, this elaborate collar, and she tries seducing him, but it's only allows him to be captured by Vincent D'Onofrio, who is now a boy king,
Yeah.
just playing. And he straps Vince Vaughn down to a bed and cuts open his stomach, pulling his intestines out and winding it around a machine.
Yeah.
That's the part I remember. Will always remember is Vince Vaughn getting his intestines wound around a machine. So he reminds her of reality by talking about how her little brother fell into a coma and she couldn't do anything about it and died. And so she kind of snaps out of it. She stabs Vincent D'Onofrio, and her and Vince Vaughn kind of escape. Well, they find themselves in a room with a very elaborate cell of the woman who has been kidnapped. Little Carl shows up, and Jennifer Lopez is trying to comfort little Carl, but finds that little Carl also has a wound where she stabbed big Carl, and starting to realize that you can't separate the two.
Right.
Vince Vaughn realizes that there is a specific symbol on the cell she's in and makes a connection to the machine that he saw in Vincent D'Onofrio's basement. And so he leaves with Jennifer Lopez and is like, I figured it out. All we have to do is go figure out what happened to this symbol, which turns out to be a company. And they gave a bunch of land to Vincent D'Onofrio's character, and just really, really contrived coincidences that he didn't like order his torture machine off eBay. No, he had to essentially inherit it.
Yeah.
And
now the government paid him to seal the property, but there was no indication as to what that property was used for.
Right. It kind of looks like a farm.
Right.
Or science experiment, something like that.
Yeah. It was odd.
But anyway, so the girl is saved, but let's not dwell on the non-interesting or non-visually fascinating story. Let's get back to Jennifer Lopez, who decides to reverse the flow. And instead of trying to reach Vincent D'Onofrio or Carl in his world, instead tries to pull him into her own. So she seals the door, goes renegade on a machine while she's asleep. We'll skip over how contrived the ability for her to do that is. They very thoroughly explain how she's capable of shutting them out in this process.
Yeah.
And instead goes and lays down and brings Carl into her world that she has created, where now she is Mary, mother of Jesus.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
She seems like a tarot card or something.
She does. That's one of her tarot cards. Yeah. And she realizes that to reach him, she has to do it with Christian values or Christian ideals.
So bringing that up, there are the music, the sand, a lot of it is very Middle Eastern.
Right.
Even some of the makeup choices, like with the white powder and stuff, is reminiscent of like African tribes. Maybe not. I don't know.
I did not pick up on that.
But I don't know. All I knew is that listening to it, I thought it sounded very Middle Eastern, and with all the sand and some of the architecture and stuff, I was thinking that it was very
Indian.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense because he is Indian. But I mean, he went to school in L.A. or something. But is there a connection between that and then the Christian? Because he has a cross on his face too when he's got this cape on.
Right.
So it seems like there's religious symbols throughout, but nothing makes sense. Oh, well, she does essentially crucify him.
That's right. She puts an arrow through his feet and then one through each hand before stabbing him where blood and water flows. But when she's killing him, she also realizes that she is killing young Carl as well, the child. And the child and the monster are essentially the same person. And little Carl tells her, like, I found a bird, but the only way to save it was to drown it, because otherwise my dad would do something much worse to it. And you kind of start realizing that's what he thinks he is doing to these women, is saving them by killing them. And ultimately, that's what she decides she has to do to Carl, is she stabs big Carl and then takes little Carl into a pool of water where she drowns him.
It's just so damn sad. Like, it reminds me of I don't know which denomination it is, but it's a Christian denomination that believes in the age of accountability. And you'll have parents that will drown their children before they reach the age of accountability as a way to save them.
To make sure they make it into heaven.
Yeah. And that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
Life that's just snuffed out because of somebody's interpretation of a book. So.
Yep. But you understand, to them, it's more than just a book. It's the truth.
That so like that's which it adds another level of frustration. But that's what it reminds me of is that whole scene. I'm like,
Yeah. So then we see that despite her going rogue and taking over this technology to literally kill a guy, soon enough she's back to work, working on Edward, and they're going sailing on water. How do you feel about it?
I think that I don't know, man. I think it ends positively. I think that they've realized that. Actually, I don't even know, man. I don't know because there's no indication as to why the kid is comatose, and there's no reasoning as to why bringing him into her mind is going to help. Maybe I missed something at the end.
So let me ask you this. What do you think is going to happen to Edward after the movie?
You saying she's going to drown him that's a mercy killing? I mean, I think that is counterintuitive. I think that the whole thing, the whole experiments and their funding is all based on trying to help this kid. And I think that if immediately she goes and like, hey, come to my world. Oh, how about I put you underwater and drown you? And then he dies. Then the parents will be like, well, what the, like, all right, well, no more funding for you.
Do you think it's about the funding, though?
I mean,
I agree it's not going to help her financial situation, but let's go over a few of the hidden things in this movie because there's a good number of them.
Okay.
So to start with, there is a lot of closeness between Jennifer Lopez's character and Carl. At the facility where they work, Jennifer Lopez has a bunch of statues around, lots of statues. There's also parallel beds, which you also see at Vincent D'Onofrio's place. They're shot very similarly, too, where there is this parallel things. And it's not just like the treatment room where there are parallel beds. When Jennifer Lopez is talking to Mariana Jean-Baptiste, I think is her name.
Yeah. Yes.
They're also sitting on like chaise lounge couches that are parallel. These equal signs of being next to each other are often used to represent characters who are equal. When characters are not equal, they will sit perpendicular. This is significant because how often you will see characters parallel to each other. For example, when Vince Vaughn saves the woman at the end, he's trying to hold her, but she keeps wiggling until they wind up perpendicular rather than parallel. Parallel is the position she was in when being grabbed by Vincent D'Onofrio, who viewed her as a bird worth saving. So he was going to drown her in the same way he was kind of drowning himself. He viewed them as parallel, whereas Vince Vaughn and her are not parallel. They're perpendicular.
Do you think there's significance to him taking a bath and then kind of going under the water and kind of spewing the, I don't know.
So water is pretty much in every shot of this movie, in some way. When Vince Vaughn first sees, I can't remember the girl's name that he kidnaps. She is next to a fountain. She and her fiance are at a fountain, and there is this kind of like stream going over. When Vince Vaughn himself is next seen after kidnapping her, he is in a bathtub making that same water motion with his mouth. I think they're trying to parallel how he feels about her, where he almost feels like he was in the fountain and she was in the fountain. I think he absolutely is thinking about that fountain at that moment. There is also a fountain when Vince Vaughn is talking to Jennifer Lopez. That's where she chooses to go and sit. And they also do not sit side by side. They sit perpendicular, not facing each other, but facing a similar point.
Right.
Because they disagree. Vince Vaughn does not believe that insanity is an excuse for murder, whereas over the course of the movie, we find out that Jennifer Lopez absolutely does. Now, I'm trying to do the parts that are outside the dream sequence first, because it's only going to get wilder once we get into dream sequences.
Yeah.
So the water is a very significant thing to Vincent D'Onofrio's character, Carl. We know that he felt very scared at his baptism, felt like he was drowning, and the only one who was going to save him was his father, who wound up betraying that trust, breaking 3 ribs and fracturing his jaw at that moment. So water is going to take place as a very big shift for him. He always seems to think about water in those moments, water as salvation. Edward, the boy in a coma at the beginning, was found.
1 second. I want to say his name is Charlie. I want to say the kid's name is Charlie.
The kid?
Yeah.
Mr. E. It's Edward.
Oh, you're right. It is Edward. For some reason, I was thinking it was Charlie the whole time. I'm like, I think that's what it is. No. Anyway, none of this is important. Sorry.
But what is significant is that he's in a coma because he was found next to the ocean. And has been for a year and a half. They have had him for 18 months and have been working on him, making absolutely no progress.
Right.
But like there are very strong tells that this moment changed Edward. For example, when Jennifer Lopez finds him, she was riding on a black horse in this very white gown and finds him. He's sitting next to a piece of driftwood in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, oh, it's a tree that fell over. Like you can look at it and be like, that's driftwood. But Edward isn't alone. There's also a monster, Moloch or something like that, in there that just wants him to stay put, wants him to be where he is. And when she tries to pull him away to go sailing, as it were, he says he doesn't want to because this other thing is there, and the other thing attacks her. The other monster that very clearly is also Edward.
Yeah.
Okay.
With like flippers or something, right?
Yeah, he's a seal. How
Yeah.
many dead kids, or how many dead seals were there? So there's yeah, he has like seal flippers. He has sharp teeth and like crazy eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what she's trying to convince him to get away from and go sailing. Well, water traumatized this kid. He was found near the ocean. She's probably not going to get him back in the water.
Which I guess makes sense as to why he's in a desert, a place that's
Right.
devoid of water.
There's no water there.
Got it.
Right. And I think she feels the water is where he reconnects with his body. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. She says the boat is broken. The boat is his body, the sailboat. And she later will say, there's nothing wrong with his body. It's all in his mind. And so when she's talking about the sailboat, he's like, there we go. It's not broken. We can fix it. We can fix, the boat. It's not too bad. And it's small. It's not the large one. The large one he manifests, the large boat, is decrepit. It's old. It's rusted. And she's like, that one's too old. There's no way we can work with that. But, I mean, if you think about it, she's not just talking about Edward. This is also Carl here. She's separating the difference between a young, small sailboat that she believes is working and the old, decrepit, broken boat that definitely is not what she wants.
Yeah.
You okay?
No, like yes. I mean, right away at the beginning of the movie, it's like, here's all of our cards, and I'm like, oh, I like this movie. Yeah, this is good. I'm watching it totally.
It's okay. Like it's like really, these are subtle things. But she's recognizing the duality of Edward the boy and Edward the monster.
Correct.
And to Edward, they are separate people, just like to Carl, they are separate people. And in his mind, there are two Carls. There is not just one. That's why she keeps finding one and the other, not one that is the other. And she even finds a grown-up Vincent D'Onofrio as playing young Carl. I think several times throughout, where
he's the one that tells her about the bird.
Yeah.
It's not him as a child. It's the Carl that we have met in the real world tells her the story about the bird and yeah.
Yeah. But so some subtle things that also will parallel Carl and Jennifer Lopez. When we go to her house, when she's actually at her house, she has statues there too. She has a statue of Buddha, and behind her you see a postcard of like a Hindu deity. I didn't get a good look at it, so I didn't really look it up all that much. And even the cartoon she's watching appears to show a depiction of Rama. It's really hard to tell. It's not Rama. Yeah. But so she's watching like this Indian cartoon. Her pillow even has like astrological symbols on it, as well as like palm reading. Really fascinating stuff because she's into these mythologies of good and bad, but those also are paralleled in the fact that she sees a black dog, she sees a white dog. The horse she's riding is black while she is dressed in white. We're going to go ahead and this is one that I don't really have a good transition into, but I think black and red are interchangeable. Okay. just because
That
there
makes
is duality, a yin and yang to these
sense.
characters.
That scene with the black dog, it's shaking. It's shaking blood off, red blood.
Right.
And the water drop or the blood droplets turn dark, and yeah, so
But the blood droplets are not red into red; they are red into white. We are not seeing, corruption in corruption. We are seeing corruption in purity, milk, and that's one of the reasons he's obsessed with bleach, is because bleach gets rid of impurities. He's obsessed with it. He's, he gets the albino German Shepherd, and I think that's, hugely significant, because he's obsessed with this kind of purity, not just for other people, but himself, making himself pure. Yeah. So another interesting thing about the horse is, at the beginning, she's riding a black horse. She gets off the black horse and it turns into a statue of a horse. That same image of a horse, if you were to like just draw it, is actually hanging in her house. So there's a picture of a bunch of horses on the wall, and one of them it's just that horse, the statue anyway. But so she has this thoughts of yin and yang as well, the good side and the bad side. She doesn't accept this at the very beginning of the movie, because she just feels like some of the bad stuff, like the black horse, the black dog, are means to an end. They are a process of getting there, getting to the good Carl, getting to the good Edward. But in a way, you could think of it that way. The black horse is it's the transportation she takes to Edward. The black dog leads her to Carl, and ultimately killing Carl is the way to save him. The black path leads her to the good path. Carl is loaded up with Christian symbolism. He's obsessed with his mother and his father, who his father was there and bad. So he's kind of like has these different versions of his mother, which Vince Vaughn sees as soon as he arrives. These three women sitting on what looks like plowed field, which I get as plowed field now. I think I used to think of it as dunes or the beach, but now I kind of see, I'm like, okay, I think this is farm, rows of farm. And they each are talking about their child, but they disagree with the way they feel about their own child. I think they all represent Carl's mother, because he doesn't know how she feels about him. So he only knows women sexually. He only knows them the way his dad treated them.
Yeah.
So the horse scene, there is a curiosity in that scene where he has taken apart a horse and it's still functioning, to understand seeing it from the inside. But Carl's not the only one who sees it this way, as a clock, mechanical in nature. Jennifer Lopez also sees it that way. Like when they're examining Edward, they're examining Vincent D'Onofrio in comas out in the real world, they're showing MRI slices of brain. They're doing brain scans and they're seeing them from the inside. So in the same way Carl is curious about the insides of animals, we see it as perverse. Is it any more perverse to see the inside of someone's brain, to try to get into someone's mind? Because the mind has places we don't show anyone else, which is a conversation they have in the movie. Do you ever, are there places inside you that you don't show anyone else? Well, they're actually breaking in and going to see those places. And so in a way, that is kind of perverse. There is unsolicited penetration of a person in psychology as well as this serial killer.
Damn. It's like a rape.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Edward did not consent to have someone enter his mind, nor did Carl. It's in many ways no different than the way that they are treating Edward and Carl. They're the way that Carl treated women, killing them and entering them without, entering their dead body.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that scares Jennifer Lopez is because the monster she sees Vincent D'Onofrio becoming, she knows she's on that path too. When they talk about how he had all these hooks, they're like, oh, you should have left those. We're like, why would anybody do that? And she's like, oh, it's because you want to feel weightless, like a bird, like floating in water. She knows. She has that answer. She is well aware of what is good about that. The similarities between them are way too present already. So when she sees the big king, powerful Vincent D'Onofrio that he could become, Carl the powerful, she knows that could be her. She knows it so well because she could be forcing Edward into those things. She could be forcing any number of people into those things. And her connection from Carl to innocent Carl to powerful Carl are scary to her. I think, my opinion. Carl sees people as objects, dolls. And that's why he says he's turning them into dolls and has several dolls at home where the heads have been replaced by birds. When you go into his museum of women, they're all serving object functionality. They're all one-dimensional, all the women. Like one of them is strapped to a dentist chair where he is obsessed with her mouth, and that's sexual. Another is a horse in a carriage. Another is an innocent deer where she is juxtaposed against pure animals. And then you have the body, the one that is incredibly muscular, who serves the function of bringing Jennifer Lopez to Carl. And I love that we don't see her face. We never see her face because it's not about the face. He doesn't care. Her job is functional. And that's the way all women are, essentially, to him, is function, not human. Yeah. I love the cape room. I know it's scary, but that's the powerful Carl that he feels when he's dominating women, making them into objects or saving them, not just as a monster or powerful, but literally a savior figure. Purple is a color, purple capes are often associated with Jesus, where we see him as having a purple robe. Like you'll often look at like crosses and they'll have purple fabric around them.
It's also a color of royalty.
It is. It's my favorite color.
Whoa.
I know. But yeah. So
there's a lot more going on in this movie than I think has been given credit to.
Probably. It's not well brought out. There's a lot of blurry lines. For example, I really think that Vincent D'Onofrio's illusions are often of a Christian nature, but that doesn't come across very easily. The only things are really like the crucifixion, the purple, the cross on his face, and that's why she chooses at the end to seduce him by looking like Mother Mary. Rather than trying to look like a powerful woman, he doesn't accept that. He accepts the Christian ideation, even though we know that she has these very Eastern religion origins based on her apartment.
Right.
I don't think that East versus West religion comes across very well. I think it could have been better pulled off. And I think he does a good job of growing from this. Obviously, I think The Fall is a better movie. And I think Immortals is an even better movie. I mean, that's why I recommend it to literally everyone. I think it's a stunning, great work of film.
Yeah. And it's makes me uneasy for some of the same reasons that this does. And it's not easy to put into words as to why I like the scene you're talking about with the three women makes me uncomfortable too. Just it's head movement. It's head movement and camera work that just makes me feel it's weird and it makes me uncomfortable.
Another thing that I think is really important that doesn't get enough credit in this movie is the practical effects. There's a lot of computer effects that happen. That's true. Yeah. But the number of practical effects in this film, I think, is incredible. I mean,
I wish the cape would have been real, but as I'm watching it, it's very, very not real.
Yeah.
But I wish it had been.
I think he wanted it to flow slowly. Like you can see it kind of, it's behind these things that are holding it. And as it comes out, it doesn't just like fall as its support goes away. It instead stays on the wall, which is what I think he wanted, why you have to animate it instead of, but the tableau at the end where he's, pulled a white peacock, a white bird, literally a bird. And she's created this like Venus because you can see a seashell behind her when she's posing as Mother Mary. I don't know if you saw that, but it's a sparkly seashell behind her.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So like she's evoking these large, powerful images of Venus and Mary. That whole area with the trees and everything was a practical miniature. And it's hard to tell it's a miniature. But there's another shot later where it kind of becomes apparent that it was a miniature. But then there's also practical sets as well with, snow and trees. Very beautiful for a first-time filmmaker.
I'm just kidding.
Just well done for a first-time filmmaker. I wish it was easier to watch.
Yeah. But it was funny, like I said last week, that looking up the trailer for it, literally all the comments are like, I watched this as a kid and it messed me up.
Why did I watch this? Why did I think this was going to be a good time?
I think this is the first time I've watched this not on USA. Yeah, so this is my first time watching it as a rated R movie.
Yeah.
And I do not ever want to watch it again. That's not to say that I think it's a bad movie. For like the 10th time, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. And it's the very reason I've never watched any of the torture porn stuff. Like I've never watched any of the, so with one exception. So I've never watched any of the Eli Roth stuff, but I love the Saw movies. It's a guilty pleasure. I think they're so bad, but yet so good at the same time. I love the ever-growing universe that these characters live in, and I love it. But that's like it. I don't even like Final Destination. It just makes me. Yeah, or any movies where someone gets brainwashed. Like watching The Avengers was hard for me because with Hawkeye not being able to control himself, it just makes my stomach like turn. I don't like that.
I'm not a fan of forceful brainwashing. I think it's a gimmick, and I've seen it too much for how unrealistic it is. Like we can't do that. So anytime you do it, it's essentially magic / sci-fi.
Yeah.
And like, if you think of any other magic / sci-fi component, memory erasure is probably like the number one use of magic sci-fi.
Mhm.
Like, there's space travel, but that's science reality. We can actually do that. Time travel, but ultimately, like, that's always like the basis of the whole movie rather than like a component of it. But just memory erasure, brainwashing,
Truth serum,
truth serum.
and then like instant knockout stuff.
Oh yeah, instant knockout, anything.
Yeah, so like
A
bolt
dart.
form takes a
Oh
couple of minutes, and is super deadly.
yeah,
Uh, and like a chop to the neck is not gonna just knock someone out for 10 minutes, and they're, oh, what happened? Like
right.
it's gonna to knock somebody out. It's gonna take some force, and it's probably gonna do damage.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's so much easier to just kill them. That's what our militaries and police always say.
Like I have an idea of doing it's like memoirs of a henchman, and like each season of this series or whatever, it's like our main character is just a gun for hire, and he goes to a different supervillain every season. And it's like, oh, I got to do my physical reports. Like, I've had 28 concussions because of, and whatever this universe's equivalent of James Bond or Bourne is. Like,
Right.
Bourne came through last week and he knocked me out. But we're friends. Like, we
Right.
watch each other on the street and he knows me. But when I'm at work,
That's always a joke on Archer, actually. Is that like someone gets knocked out and they're like, "Oh, were you unconscious?" That's like super bad. Like yeah, it's really bad when you get knocked unconscious. And it's always so funny because that's what the bad guys do. They knock you out rather than just being like, we found an intruder and we killed him.
yeah.
Uh,
Lucky Yates does work with the brothers Chap, the guys that did Homestar Runner.
it's interesting. Do you know I know Lucky Yates, like, actually know him?
I mean, it makes sense now because that means that he's probably an ATLian if you know him.
Okay, so when I was an actor in Atlanta, or a long time ago, I was doing work with Tim Stoltenberg. I was doing a show with Tim Stoltenberg, who was head of improv at Dad's Garage. And so he and Lucky would always get lunch. So Lucky would come over to the Center for Puppetry Arts, where I was doing a show at the time, and have lunch with him.
Wow. I mean, so then that also makes sense because I think the brothers Chap started at the art, the puppetry center because Homestar Runner, I think,
That's
started
right.
as a puppet show. I think, or I know they've done a puppet show. Um, or I know it started as a drawing because it's from the Olympics. The '96 Olympics is where
Okay.
the idea came from because Mark Lemke is the Homestar Runner. The whole story is that I guess, were not big baseball fans,
Yeah.
and they were trying to say the home run star, I think, or something like that. And they're talking about Mark Lemke, who I guess I mean, I know who Mark Lemke is, but I don't remember his stats. But I guess he was a big home run hitter. And they called him a home star runner instead of like a home run star or something. But then that's where the genesis of the name came from.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I mean, I loved Homestar Runner, as did like everyone in my age in the South, because I have noticed as I've moved, Homestar Runner didn't quite make it this far. Like no one here knows what it is. I'm like, oh, come on, Strong Bad, Strong Sad, Homestar,
Oh man.
Marzipan, what is the cheat? What? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that like Atlanta people know that like anything Adult Swim, like is apparently not as popular everywhere else.
Weird.
Yeah. But I mean, like here it's so known that like anything on Adult Swim, we're all like huge fans of.
Yeah.
But so now I'm torn because the movie I was inspired to give you for next week, um, definitely falls into that. There's a lot of extreme cuts. There's a lot of hard to watch, but it is also incredibly beautiful. In my opinion, it is what The Cell could have been aiming for, which is you're already making an art film. Don't give us a dose of reality next to art, but instead make art, you know. Um, Alternatively, we could just go with something a little safer that I've been wanting to rewatch.
I mean, if this has inspired you to do something else, I mean, I was inspired to do The Cell because of the Immortals or Immortals. I mean, I'll just don't make me watch Cannibal, whatever, Cannibal Holocaust.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
No.
just don't make me watch that.
So this is a weird one. I know no one's ever heard of this movie, but it's one of my favorites. It's a great art movie. Perfume, Story of a Murderer.
Okay.
It's on my server. You'll find it. It is absolutely wild. Dustin Hoffman. I think Alan Rickman. Yeah.
Mr. Potter. Well, we're certainly going to get a YouTube audience with this.
But it is a wild movie. It's
Who knows? Maybe we will. Maybe people will be like, oh, what a weird, yeah, let me see what this is about, and then get captivated.
but like again, I don't think many people have seen this movie, but I do think they should. I think this is a filmmaker making cinema, uh, and I think it could appeal to any number of audiences, and it also appeals to my terrible, terrible taste in wanting to think I'm sophisticated and watching movies that focus on like Victorian England and in this case France, kind of 18th century France, 19th century France, maybe.
And it's all tied together by a single bottle of perfume.
It's oh. But like the worst, it's the absolute worst concept. If you read anything about the movie, you're going to be like, this is going to be awful. So go into it dry if you can. Just be like, all right, I'm stuck watching this movie. But it's wild.